Alright, after the installation of Frida, let's have a look into hooking a method. So this is now overriding an existing method in memory, and that's the power about Frida. Therefore, we start with the example that's also provided in the API documentation, but let me introduce you some background information for this one over here. So we've got our application, and this application is loading a bunch of code, Java code. For example, we are using some strings in our application. We are also maybe having an additional class. And most important for this exercise right now, we are importing or using an activity. Activity, we have seen this before, this is just a screen content. And an activity has some kind of life cycle. So there are certain events in an activity that can occur. And for example, if we pause an application, so we put this application into the background and then we are opening it once again, then the onResume method is being called. If an activity gets created, the onCreate method is being started. This is the place we are inserting our code all the time. So an activity has a bunch of methods, and what we are doing right now in this exercise is the following. The activity is being loaded out of this Java virtual machine, and by running the Frida server right now, we are connecting to this one with our client and we are overriding this method. So we are hooking into the activity class and then we are overriding this with our own code. So we are manipulating this class. In the first example over here, we are not doing any malicious stuff over here. We just print some statements that this method has been executed. So this is also a really amazing thing to keep track on which methods are being called. And of course, we can do a bunch of more stuff over here. But first, let's start with this example. Let's print out some text if this method is being called. So we are overriding this method in the Java virtual machine. And every time the onResume method is being called, we are printing out the text to our console. Alrighty? Okay, and therefore let's dive into this. Okay, back at the Ubuntu VM, let's first start our setup. Our setup not regarding to the man-in-the-middle connection, our setup regarding to the Frida server. So let's check out if we have our virtual machine running. Yes, so we can also fetch the screen over here. Nice. Then we need a new terminal and we go into this virtual machine. We need root privileges and we go into data local temp. Now we start our Frida server, and in my case, I guess I'm using a 32-bit version. Okay, the Frida server is running. We put this on the right because this is now running on the smartphone. And if we open a new terminal, we can now use Frida-ps, and we have to provide the -u parameter to read out the processes via the ADB connection and get it back over here. Let's see. There we have it. Okay, now let's have a look how we can hook into this Java virtual machine and manipulate all these classes, methods, variables, and things like this. We can find this in the official documentation, and this is very helpful. Therefore, I would like to go this way. So within frida.re, under docs, and then within the JavaScript API, we can now search for java.perform. We will talk about this in a moment. Here we have it. This is now how we can hook an activity. And so we take this code and we will completely disassemble it to figure out what's going on over here. Therefore, let's copy this code and we open a new terminal, or Visual Studio Code Editor. Then we open a new file and we paste it in. We can now select the JavaScript language because this code is JavaScript. Okay, for now I would like to rewrite this code a little bit, and then we will take this on the graphic tablet and we will discuss every line in there. What I like to rewrite is the following. I do not like this convention over here. So I delete this one over here because what we are having here is an anonymous function call. Alright, it's exactly the same, but I like to use it over here this way because then I see, okay, we are having a function java.perform, and as a parameter we are providing now an anonymous function. Don't worry about this. We will take this now on the graphic tablet and then we will completely disassemble it. Alrighty, let's go. Okay guys, you know what? Let's simply run this code first because I guess then it's a little bit easier to follow this on the graphic tablet. Alright, we do not understand anything in this code right here. Absolutely perfect. We did also start with the Smiley the exact same way. And after a few sections, we became absolutely Smiley ninjas. That's the same for the Frida over here. I will promise this to you. Therefore, let's simply take this code and let's see how we can run this. So, let's see. Okay, first we need an application we want to target. let's see what's installed over here. We can use whatever application you like. You can also use pre-installed application like the camera app, the gallery, or things like this. In my case, I like to use the AES application because the layout was pretty sick in there, right? Absolutely. Okay, so now we have this application running. The first thing we need to do is we need to get the package identifier for this one, because this is the identifier which Frida uses to hook into this process. Let me make this terminal a little bit larger. And we put this on the right. Okay, to get the package identifier, we can simply use Frida PS-U, and then we are searching for or grabbing for AES. Okay, here we have it. This is the process ID and this one is the package identifier. Nice. So now, let's copy this and then let's make this a little bit larger. And now we start hooking into this process. So how can we hook into this? The command is pretty simple. All we need to do is running Frida-U to tell Frida to use the ADB connection. And then we need to provide the package identifier, so the process we want to hook into this. And that's all for now. We will learn about some additional parameters later on, but for now, this is all we need to do to hook into this process. All right, and now we can see we are now in a Frida terminal over here. So this is on our laptop, but this is now a Frida terminal that can interact with the process over here. We can have two ways to run a Frida script. Directly in this terminal over here, or we can also provide this Frida script as some kind of parameter over here. So we can save this Frida script, for example this one here, in a JavaScript file, and then we can tell Frida to load this script over here. Then the action we are mentioned here will be performed in this process. All right? Maybe not, but I guess it will be a little bit more clear if we get into this topic further and further. Okay, so let's see. We have copy pasted this, and now all we need to do is we need to paste it in here. It looks absolutely messy, and we can see Frida is also providing some IntelliJ over here, but this code should be working out of the box. So if we hit enter right now, all right, we do not get an error. That's good. So what is this code doing right now? I will give you a short introduction to this one. We are hooking into the Android app activity class. This is the root class of all activities. And then we are hooking into the method onResume. We will take a look into this in a moment. Every time this method is now being called, we print out a debug text, this one over here in this terminal. And so what we are doing right now is the following. We are hooking in the onResume method of every application right now in this process. So in this app over here. And then we are overriding this method. We tell print out the following statement. And if we do this, the application would afterwards completely crash, because this is now the new definition of this method. Therefore, afterwards, we are also calling the original onResume method that this application can load with the original code that's inserted there. I know, it's a little bit complex right now, but I guess if we test this and if we get into this topic, you will get more and more familiar with it. All right? Therefore, let's simply run this. Okay, we have already run this. Let's execute this. We can trigger this if we call the onResume method. And this one, if we take a look at the activity lifecycle, this one over here, so here we are now in the official Android developer documentation, and this is a lifecycle of an activity. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see this perfectly over here. So when the activity is being launched, the onCreate method is being called. We have seen this a lot. This creates the activity, and yeah, that's also the place we are putting in our code. Then after the onCreate, the onStart method is being called, and then the onResume method is being called. Then our activity is running. This is the state we are having right now. The app is simply just running. If we can trigger the onPause method, for example, if we put this into the background, this application, then afterwards the onResume method over here will be called once again. And then our application will simply run again. So it switches into the activity running state after the onResume. Alright, so to trigger the onResume method, all we have to do is putting the app into the background and then opening it once again. And let's do this. Maybe let's close this over here. Okay, on the left we've got our client, and we have now overwritten this method over here. So if you put this into the background, so we simply go into the home screen. All right, so far nothing happened because we have now called the onPause method. If you go back into this application, so if you're opening it once again, then the onResume method will be called. Let's see. There we go. We have now a message, payload, onResume, let's call the original implementation. So this is our debug text over here. And this is now every time the case we put this application into the background. So we have overwritten the onResume method with this following code. Print out the debug statement and then call the original method once again. Why this one is important, we will find out in the next section. For now, let's have a quick introduction into hooking a method generally. Alright, so here we are back on the graphic tablet, and now let's figure out what this function over here does. We will disassemble every single line and we will try to figure out what every single line in here does. At the beginning, it's a little bit confusing, absolutely, but we will get better and better the more we practice. Alright, so let's go. We start with the first line over here, this one, java.perform. But the first thing before we dive into this is I find the structure a little bit confusing. Therefore, let's figure out where those brackets begins and where they end, because it looks absolutely messy, even more messy than my drawings right now. Therefore, let's see. Java.perform. This one is a function and we've got the opening bracket here. And now the closing bracket is here at the end. So we do not have a function body in there. We just got this function call and this whole stuff in here. And let me draw this real quick. This stuff here, this is a parameter. I know, it's absolutely, it looks strange. We've gotten function as a parameter. So yeah, it looks a little bit messy, but we will make our way through this, all right? Okay, so let's get rid of this one. And now let's take the next function, this one over here. So this is now our parameter. And here we have an anonymous function. And this one ends over here. Yes. Then within this function, we've got another function. This one over here. And this one. This starts here. And it ends over here. Okay. So I guess now it's a little bit more clean where all those function begins and ends. Right? Okay, so now we can start with analyzing this function code over here. And we start with the first one, java.perform. And we can see regarding to the brackets, this one is just a function call. So this is not a function definition. We are calling here a function. So let's write this down. Java.perform. And we are calling a function. In this case, we do not have a function body, so we do not have it like this way. This is not a function definition, therefore we do not have those two. We are just calling a function, therefore we only have this function call regarding to those brackets. So let me get rid of this one. Okay. And within this function, we are now providing an anonymous function as a parameter. I know, absolutely crazy, but we are on JavaScript right now, and yeah, that's the way it goes right here. All right, now what does java.perform do? We have seen that Frida is available for multiple platforms. We have seen it's available for iOS, it's available for Linux, Windows, Android, and maybe more. I'm not sure about this one. And therefore, we have to tell Frida on which platform we are operating right now, on what Frida should do. In this case, we want to override the Java function. This Java function, we will get into this in a moment, but this one is stored in the Java virtual machine on your Android smartphone. So when you boot up your smartphone, the whole classes of those Java code gets loaded into this Java virtual machine. And now by using java.perform in Frida, we are telling Frida, please attach to this Java virtual machine. So maybe let's draw this over here. So here we have the smartphone. All right, and the smartphone has now this JVM, this Java virtual machine. And this one is loading or hosting all those Java classes and methods and more. And now if we are writing java.perform, Frida is attaching into this Java virtual machine. Therefore, we have now access to all those classes and methods over here. And this is exactly what we want to do. We want to override a class which this application is using, And every time the application is being opened, so here we have our application, this one is being opened on the smartphone, it's also accessing those class files over here. So these are those, this is the code which is get loaded by this application. And now by using Frida, we can hook into this Java virtual machine, this one over here. And we can tell, okay, we want to override this method, for example, which this application is using. And then when the application is calling this method, we are overriding it with our stuff we want to do in this function. All right? Okay. So I announced it that it's a little bit confusing, but if we do this more and more and keep practicing this, it will get a little bit clear to you. All right. So this is what java.perform is doing. It's just telling Frida, please hook into the Java virtual machine that we have access to those Java classes and methods. All right, let me clean this up real quick. Okay, so I didn't clean it up. I did write it a little bit more clean because I guess it's useful if we have this on the top left to get back on this one. All right, so now we know what java.perform is doing. There's some magic happening in the background, but this simply tells Frida hook into the Java virtual machine. Okay, next we've got an anonymous function. So this is our parameter over here. So we are providing a whole function as parameter. Okay, so in the next line we have now the magic that Frida is doing, and the whole concept of Frida, it's super amazing. So therefore let's figure out what's going on over here. This one. The first part, that's normal JavaScript part. So this one here, this is just a variable. And let's write this down. Const activity. Okay, this is just a variable. We can name this whatever we like. There's nothing special on here. The magic over here happens in the second part, in this one over here, java.use. This is another function call. So let's write this down. Java.use. Okay, what is java.use doing? First, let's figure out what's the parameter of this function. And this one over here is Android app activity. This is now a class reference. So the package name is Android app, and the class name over here, that's the class name. This is now a Java class. And what java.use is doing over here, it's getting a reference of this class and it's assigning it into this activity variable. So here we are providing our class name. And this one is now being assigned into the activity. If you take a look onto the top left, it looks in the following way. So the Java virtual machine has loaded this activity class during the application initialization, the startup of this app. So here we are having an activity class. And this activity class is now being referenced into this const activity variable, and this one over here. This means if the application is using an activity, in this one for example, because the application is using an activity, that's the screen content. Here we're having an activity. That's the screen content of this application. We are now having a reference to the screen content, in this one over here, into our, add our activity variable. So this is just a reference to this activity class in the Java virtual machine. And it's absolutely mind-blowing, because this means every time the application is using an activity over here, we are now having a reference to this activity. So we can now override every activity function method variable in here. And this is exactly what happens in the next line. So this line, all it's doing, it's simply just getting a reference to this class name into this variable, activity. All right? Okay, in the next line we can see we have now our variable name, activity. So let's take yellow again. So we are having activity. And then we are providing a dot. And now we are accessing this class like we do this in our Java world, it's mind-blowing. So we can say activity dot, and now we can provide the method we want to override. And in this case, the method is named on resume. So we are telling activity on resume. This is now the method. And now we can tell dot implementation. So that's a point. Here we have a dot. And now that's the third part over here. And this one is now dot implementation. And this means we can now provide a new implementation to this method. So let's take a look on the top left once again. This activity has methods, for example, on start, on resume, on pause, and so on. And what we are doing right now is we tell Frida, hook into the Java Virtual Machine over here, search the activity class, now get the method on resume. This is now a method. And now we want to redefine this. We want to provide a new function for this method over here. So we want to override this code at this point. Okay? So this is what we are doing right here. We've got our activity, we've got our on resume, and now we want to have a new implementation. And now we can provide a new function to this one. So we are telling equal sign. And now we are telling, okay, we want to have a new function. This one over here. I'm gonna write this down here. So we want to provide a new function. And this will now override the existing method on resume with our code right now. So we are overriding this piece of code in the Java Virtual Machine with our code right now. And what we are doing is simply over here, we are printing out a debug statement. Send on resume and so on. And then that's the important point right now. So this one over here, this line, this one is simply just printing out a debug statement to our attacker machine, our terminal in our attacker machine. So if we have here our attacker machine, we get now just simply printed out a debug statement over here. And if we would leave this function as it is right now, so if we are overriding the onResume function in this way, then the application would crash. Why? Because if we take a look back to this one over here, here we have overwritten, in this one, we have overwritten the original method right now. But the original method serves a purpose, of course. So there's some code that needs to be done, otherwise the application doesn't function anymore. And if we are overwriting this piece of code over here right now with our code, with the cyan code, I guess that's what the color is named, then we are printing out our debug statement over here in this one. But we have overwritten the original function and therefore the original code is not being called anymore. Therefore, the application crashes. And this is the reason for the next line. Here, what we are doing is we are having this operator. This and this operator over here, this one, this operator, this is now a reference to the original activity object. So if we are calling this dot on resume over here, this dot on resume, we are calling back the original function of this class over here. So what Frida is doing, we've got java.perform. This means Frida, please hook into this Java Virtual Machine. Okay, now we've got access to all these methods and classes which are stored in there. Then we tell Frida over here at this line, please get a reference from the activity class, in this one, and store this in the activity variable over here. Okay, then we are using this activity variable. And now we want to get into the onResume method because we have now a reference into our Java Virtual Machine. Classes activity, this one over here. And now we want to override the onResume method over here. And we want to define a new implementation, this one. Now we are providing a new implementation, which is here in the color cyan. So we are overriding the existing code with our code right now. But this would lead to a problem, because if we do not call the original code afterwards, then the application will crash because we have overwritten original existing necessary code with our code. And yeah, we have interrupted the application flow at this point. Therefore, what we are doing is, after calling our method, we need to call the original method on resume. So we need to call this original method here once again. And then the application can work properly. So after printing out our debug statement over here, this one over here, the application gets called in their original state. So not the application, the function gets called in their original state. So after printing out the debug statement, we are calling this function once again. And then this one calls the original onResume method, which means the application is now loading the original onResume method and works properly. I know. This is a lot of stuff in there, but it will get clearer. I've got a lot of exercises for you where you can see the difference between not calling this function over here and calling this function, and when we need to call this original function and when we do not need to do it. All right? So at this point right now, it's just important that you've gotten basic understanding of what Frida is doing right now. And the things that seems right now a little bit complex, they will get clearer if we move on this point. So you do not have to understand this example fully right now. I've got a really nice exercise where we split up these whole steps into single pieces and experiment around with this. And by doing this, you will get an understanding of what's going on over here. For now, I just want to give you an introduction into Frida, what these fancy brackets and scripts look like, and yeah, what it's doing, and yeah, how it's basically working. Alright, so this was the introduction to Frida. We have already seen this live on an example where we have put the application into the background, and after calling or opening it up once again, in this one over here, we have seen, okay, our debug statement here has been printed out. So this is the way how we can hook into an existing method and overriding the functionality of this one. Okay, in the next video we start with a very nice example, which is an dicer application. So if you're a person like me who has not that much luck, then we will find a way how we can circumvent this, at least in the Android world right now. Okay? Alright. If you haven't understand everything in here, absolutely no problem. We will get through this over and over again. So you can directly move on with the next video, and I'm looking forward to see you there.